The Azam, Part 119. The Lucknow Pact of 1916 is a striking example of what could be achieved by men of resolve and goodwill, and yet in the final round still failed to deliver. Jinnah, along with Tilak, was among the main actors who had brought about 1916 Lucknow Pact. Jinnah had himself travelled some distance from being an uncompromising opponent of the separate electorates to modified accommodation of that concept. But all this was for the larger national objective of Hindu-Muslim unity. Clearly, Jinnah often did change his position, but only exceptionally his methods of political operation. He would not, rather could not temperamentally support an agitational mode which Gandhi had adopted as his principal instrument. Jinnah, staying within the confines of the constitutional methods, Gandhi's much greater public appeal, resulting in his rapid political ascendancy, and the larger political trends of the council reforms of 1919 began to shut many political doors for Jinnah. Moreover, as this gulf widened and eventual parting of the ways became inevitable, perhaps that was also inherent in the personalities of two principal actors, in the very dynamic of the unfolding events, also no doubt in this quickening pace of the global developments, for the twilight of the empire had now begun to descend. Let us recapitulate briefly the principal events of that period. The first, of course, were the council reforms of 1909. Under these, the government was answerable to the Legislative Council, and irrespective of what the council determined was not obliged to heed their decisions. With the 1919 Act, this changed. The government's monopoly of power now got diluted remarkably. So for the Raj, this was actually an act of voluntarily giving up some share, albeit tiny, of imperial authority, and this was also the first ever. The power so shed now transferred to the Indian hands, consequently placing upon the governments an obligation to obtain the cooperation of others for a proper administration of the Raj. Montagu-Chelmsford reforms, also called the Montfort reforms, were implemented under the legislated authority of the Government of India Act 1919. This act introduced the diarchy of the provinces, and the executive was bifurcated, whereby certain departments for the first time were put in charge of the elected ministers, who were then responsible for legislature. The rest stayed as they were, the government officials, principally members of the government's executive council, heading them. As it is, these reforms had not really been welcomed wholeheartedly, whereafter two grave errors combined and added to the difficulties in their implementation. The first was passing of the Rowlatt Act, allowing preventive detention, and the second was the General Dyer's unthinkably cruel and mindless massacre of the innocents in the Jallianwala Bagh. These came together, gravely hampering any proper functioning of the Act 1919. Besides, now Gandhi too launched his non-violent, non-cooperation movement against. Yet these very council reforms of 1919 also set into motion trends of such lasting import that they influenced events materially until well into 1930s, when it came to the second council elections of 1923. It became clear that the politics of the national level would henceforth have to more satisfactorily attend to the demands of the provinces, and that this in turn would markedly influence what, in the absence of any better phrase, we continue to call an all-India platform. However, not as recognized or voiced in the 20s, this until now unstated and unvoiced question of the central importance to Indian polity and governance now began to be raised. What should be the form of the governance in India? Federal decentralized governance or unitary centralized rule? To the existing contention of the separate electorates, therefore, got added to the controversies of diarchy now